This lesson is for the HMH 8.3 solving percent problems. The essential question is, how do you use percents to solve problems? You are going to want to make sure you have your notes for 8.3 open in Notability so you can fill in the information as I walk you through the lesson. If you are not able to get into the HMH lesson, you can use this video to complete your notes. All right, again, we are figuring out how to use percents to solve problems. So here's our first question. A sports store received a shipment of 400 baseball gloves. 30% were left-handed. How many left-handed gloves were in the shipment? So we have some important information we want to look at, and we're going to talk through what is it that we need to do. So 30% means 30 out of 100. Remember, 30% percent means per 100. So there were 30 left-handed gloves in each batch of gloves. So we can figure out for each of those 100 gloves in that 400, there will be 30 that are left-handed. So our first 100, so 100, there's 30 in that 100, 200, another 30, 300, another 30, and 400, another 30, which gets us to 120. We can use this percent bar model to also show that. So 0 gloves, 0%. At 10%, 40 gloves are left-handed. At 20%, 80 gloves are left-handed. As you can see, we are increasing by 40 gloves per 10%. So we continue by filling in 120, 160, 200, 240, 280, 320, and 360. We can see what number correlates with each percent using this bar model. Our question was, how many are left-handed if 30% are left-handed? And we can see that right here. Out of a total of 400 gloves, there are 120 left-handed gloves. What is 35% of 60? 35% of 60 can be written two ways. So we can write it as percent, 35% of 60, and then we're going to write it as a fraction. 35% as a fraction is 35 over 100, 35 per 100. Then we're going to multiply. When we see the word of, that just tells us we're going to multiply. So we want to know 35% or 35 hundredths times 60 to figure out what is 35% of 60. So remember, when we multiply fractions, we multiply the numerators and we multiply the denominators. So 35 times 60 gets me to 2,100. 100 times 1 gets me to 100. So I have 2,100 divided by 100. I'm going to simplify that, and I end up with 21. So 35% of 60 is 21. What is 5% of 180? We're going to write the percent as a fraction and then change it to a decimal. So 5% means 5 out of 100, or 5 hundredths. The decimal for 5 hundredths, or 5%, is 0 and 5 hundredths. Then we can multiply. Remember that when you multiply decimals, you just line up your number and ignore the decimal point at first. So I'm just going to multiply 180 times 5. And then I go back to my problem to figure out how many decimal places I need to put into my problem. So I can see there are 0 decimal places in 180. There are 2 decimal places in 5 hundredths. So I need to find my decimal point and move it 2 over, and I end up with 9.00, which is just the number 9. So 5% of 180 is 9. You could also use your calculator to help you do these problems. All right, next problem. The school principal spent $2,000 to buy some new computer equipment. Of this money, $120 was used to buy some new keyboards. What percent of the money was spent on keyboards? So we're going to set up a proportion, which means we're going to have two equivalent ratios. So we're trying to figure out what percent, what number goes here with our 100, matches our $120 that was spent to buy some new keyboards. And this $2,000 was the total amount spent. So we're trying to figure out what number fills in that to make two equivalent ratios or a proportion. So I have to think, 100 times what will get me to 2,000? Well, if I multiply 100 times 20, I'll get to 2,000. So whatever this number is, times 20 will get me to $120. So I have times 20 equals $120. I can look at kind of an easy fact to help me. 2 times something gets me 12. Oh, so 6. Let's try 6. 6 times 20. Yeah, that will work. So that tells me what percent of the money was spent on keyboards? 6% was spent on keyboards. Here's another one with our proportion, our part to whole. 12 of the students in the school choir like to sing solos. These 12 students make up 24% of the choir. How many students are in the choir? So we have our 12 students right here. That's the portion of students who like to sing solos. And that, we were told, is 24%. So that's why we see 24 out of 100 as our second proportion. And we're trying to figure out the whole. What number would go here to make these two ratios equivalent? So we can think in our brains, 12 times what gets me to 24? Oh, well, 12 times 2. So this number times 2 would get me to 100. And that will tell me how many students are in the whole choir. So I know that 50 times 2 will get me to 100. So 50 students are choir. So lesson 8.3 summary. To find a percent of a number, we can multiply the number by the fraction or decimal equivalent of the percent. Or to find an unknown percent or part, we can solve a proportion comparing the percent to the ratio of the part to whole.